Now, I hope you brought your books and your pencils because today we're gonna learn something. Hey guys, Lyrics Messiah here with you again, and today we're actually gonna look at some of the basics of photography. So I guess we could kind of title this How to Take a Picture for Beginners. And today I am making this video for one person in particular, and that's Jamel. Jamel reached out to me. He's like a little brother to me, and he asked me to do a video kind of showing him how to take pictures. So that's what this video is going to be about, me attempting to do a sort of tutorial on introduction to photography. So Jamal, tell me, how do you take a picture?
Well, I don't know how you take a picture, but I just turn on my camera, make sure I can see this screen, this screen, and find something to take a picture of. Spot that thing, get the correct zoom, press this to focus up. And take it.
Okay. Show me how you take a picture of these flowers here.
Like this part right here.
Yeah.
Get it. I'm gonna take it like the whole flower.
You proud of that picture?
Yeah. It's a good looking picture.
So the turn on the camera part is fine. The make sure you can see the screen, that's fine. The tree of viewfinder, that's fine. However, you missed three important steps. Check your aperture, check your ISO, check your shutter speed. Any of those things mean anything to you?
Your shutter speed is how much pictures you'll take with one press. I don't that much.
No, that's wrong. Alright, so let me explain that to you. Let me just explain something real quick. Y'all remember these guys? You probably don't notice them in the background anymore. I'm trying to clean up the background so it's not as distracting. I don't know, I need some feedback on that. Do you guys think this is a better look? Yes? No? Alright, cool. So, how does a picture happen? Or how is a picture taken? Let's imagine that this is my camera, right? So, this is the camera, this is a different camera. And let's pretend that the mouth is the lens. So this is the lens. This is the lens. Cool? We following? Nice. When you press the button to take a picture, what happens is the shutter, which is like a curtain or a window behind the lens, opens and then it closes. When that opens, it lets light into the camera. And then there's, well, what used to be film, but now it's digital, that captures what that light looked like when the shutter was open and then just saves it when the shutter is closed. We following? Nice. That is just a real basic view of the science of how a picture is taken. Why did I explain that? Because I want you guys to understand that in taking a picture, you really only need two things. One is the thing that you're gonna use to take the picture, so your camera or your phone, whatever it is. And two, light. Those are the only two things you really need. Of course, you want to have the thing that you're taking a picture of. But apart from that, just the camera and light. What's really important about that is that the light. Everything else is about the light. So, from now on, I'm going to refer to you guys as photographers. Promotion. Alright, cool. When you're taking a picture, your job is basically to control the light. So, how do you take a picture? Well, for a beginner, you're going to want to turn on your camera and make sure you could see. That part is super important. So if you have to take off the lens cap, if you have to turn on the viewfinder, which is what this is called, or you just look at the screen, right? So the camera's on, you could see. The next 3 steps all have to do with controlling light, and that has to do with adjusting your ISO, your aperture, and your shutter speed. Now ISO is just an abbreviation for this big word and it's basically the sensitivity of your camera to light. Meaning, if you turn up your ISO, your camera is gonna perceive more light, and if you turn down your ISO, it's gonna perceive less light. What that translates to is a higher ISO is a brighter image, and a lower ISO is a darker image. Now we need to note with ISO, while it increases the sensitivity of your camera to light, it also degrades the quality of your image. When you carry your ISO really high, that's when the image starts to get grainy.
Checking my ISO. Want to put it smaller because we have all these lights. So we can put it on 800.
When you have light and you want to get just a little bit more light, ISO might not be the way to go, because as you carry that ISO higher, the image quality gets lower. So we need to remember that relationship. Because it might look good on the camera, which is like the image is about this big, and then you put it on a computer and it's about this big, and you put it on a billboard and it's like this big, and it's like yeah. So you want to keep your ISO as low as possible. So starting at 800, no. Another way that you could get more light into the image is to adjust your aperture. Now, what is aperture? Well, let's say this is your lens, right? And just for the sake of this illustration, we're going to pretend that this entire circle in the center is just the hole in the lens where light is going to come into. The aperture is basically a measurement of the distance between the edge of that hole and the end of the lens. Yeah? And so, as that hole gets larger, the aperture will get smaller. As that hole gets smaller, the aperture will get larger in terms of the measurement of it. So how does that affect light? Well, because aperture is just the measurement of the distance between the hole and the edge of the lens and not the size of the hole, as that gets larger, the aperture number will actually get smaller. And a smaller aperture is usually preferred to a larger aperture. Why? When the aperture number is really small, it means that your lens is wide open. And that allows for more light to come into the camera. When more light comes into the camera in this way, we get what we call a shallow depth of field. What is a shallow depth of field? Well, right? I put that box in the background while you guys are looking at me. Do you notice how it's just slightly out of focus? Now, if I were to bump up my aperture, you will notice that it's actually more in focus now. But you'll also notice that the image is darker. Reason for this being, as the aperture number gets larger, remember, the opening of the lens gets smaller, less light comes in. There's less information for the camera to decipher between, and so everything is now in focus. Whereas if it had a lot more information, it would be able to tell, okay, this is actually a lot more in front of that, and therefore I should be more in focus. Yeah? Let me readjust my aperture and we will continue.
Boom!
So, I have just traded out
for
that Canon for my Lumix. So, if you guys remember, this is the first camera that I would have bought. The reason I'm doing that is because it's giving him aperture, an aperture of 1.7, which is a lot lower than the 3.5 that was offered on the lens on the Canon, right? Now he's gonna get a shallower depth of field, and we just explained what depth of field is. So that way, when he arranges these objects however he chooses, he could choose to focus on one specific thing and direct the attention of the audience. Now, the final way that you could get more light into the image in the camera is by adjusting what we call the shutter speed. Your shutter speed is basically how long your shutter, which we refer to as the window behind the lens, will be open for. So let's say your shutter speed was 1 second, then it will be open for 1 second and then close. Let's say your shutter speed was 1/60th of a second, so it's a fraction of a second now. then it'll just be open, close. Yeah? Now, while that shutter is open, that's when the light is coming in. If it's open for longer, more light will come in. If it's open for shorter, less light will come in. What you need to know about the shutter speed in photography though, is that while it's open and it's detecting light, it's also detecting everything that's happening. So for example, if you wanted to take a picture of my hand here, and you had the shutter speed kinda low, so let's say it was at 1 second, if my hand were to move while that shutter was open, you're gonna get that blur. So it also works like that in video as well, but we're talking about photography. However, I'll use this video to illustrate. So right now my shutter speed is about 1/50th of a second. And so you see what's going on here, right? I'm gonna up the shutter speed. So now my shutter speed is 1/640, which is 640th of a second. And look at my hands. You could see everything that my hands do because the shutter speed is so high. So it's just quick, just capturing. You'll also notice that the image is darker, and that is because it's only open for a split second, so only so much light could come in. So it's just detecting quick bursts. Now, what if we had the shutter speed at 1 second? Well, so the first thing you're gonna notice is that it's bright. I've actually had to turn off the lights in the studio because it's letting so much light into the camera. But also, it looks like if I'm lagging. It's not that I'm lagging, it's that while the shutter is open, it's getting this blur. Yeah? So let's go back to how it usually is. So when adjusting shutter speed, you need to take into consideration this relationship. A slower shutter is going to give you more light, but it's also going to give you more what we call image blur, right? Which is what you saw. A higher or a faster shutter speed is going to give you less light, however, it will freeze the image. So if you were taking a picture of someone jumping, you would want a high shutter speed.
That's it. Right.
Best picture you think you could take today?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So hopefully too many people have not left the video already. But those are the 3 ways that you could control light in the camera. And if you have a smartphone, the Pro feature of your smartphone is going to allow you to adjust these settings. So you could actually check that out for yourself. Check the aperture, check the ISO, and check the shutter speed. How will you know which is which? Well, if it's not written in there, the shutter speed is represented as a fraction. So you'll see 1/60, 1/120, 1/, and it's basically fractions of a second. And the aperture is gonna usually be denoted as f and a decimal number. So let's say f2 or f2.0. That is how they usually denote the aperture. And well, ISO, more often than not, is written as ISO. However, it goes up in increments of 100, 200, 400, 800, 1600, and so on. So for a beginner, how to take a picture, turn on your camera, adjust ISO, adjust the aperture, adjust the shutter speed. For the person who's been doing photography for a while, how do you take a picture? Well, you turn on the camera, you adjust to make sure you have the right lighting, and then you shoot. For a person who's a professional, let's say, in photography, how do you take a picture? You turn on the camera, you point and you shoot. Because all of those other things, they're just going to be second nature. I'm calling it definitions, but really I'm referring to the thought processes. I'm talking about the way you should be thinking about taking a picture. As a beginner, where you have to consider all of these technical things, as opposed to professional, where these things just come to you and really all you need to consider is pointing and shooting. Understand? Now, after you've learned all of the rules of photography, and there are a few, rules of composition, rules of exposure, rules of color, color science, color temperature, and it goes on and on and on. But once you learn all the rules, you could break all of the rules, because that's when you now get to put in creativity. What do I mean? Well, let's say, for example, you were shooting a picture and you want to capture that grainy effect. Well, then you would carry your ISO up to way past what you would if you were going by the books. But that's because creatively, that's what you're going for. Almost like most other creative fields of study, you learn the rules and then you learn how to break the rules. And that's what I love about photography. Thank you for tuning into today's video. I think what I'm gonna do from now on is on Tuesdays, that's gonna be the teaching day. So I'm either gonna teach you guys something new or take you guys on the journey of me learning something new. And then on Thursday it'll be the more cinematic stuff. Saturday is the vlog. And well, Sunday I'm trying to bring on a podcast. Still working on that. So be sure, yeah guys, so that's it for now. If you like the video, be sure to like the video. And if you have any comments, so if the technical stuff was too technical or if it needs to be simplified more, let me know. It's because I want to make it better for you guys. Remember, we're building something together here. So, we setting the rules, right? Or they get to establish the rules, and then I get to establish how to break the rules. Alright guys, so Lyrics Messiah here. Signing off. Until next time, may the light expose you well.
Let's raise the iOS. Let's do that.
iOS.
Wait. Apple, I'm terribly sorry. ISO, that's what I meant to say. Same letters.